Everyone for being here today. Do appreciate the time. Especially appreciate on behalf of the OEPA that we're live streaming this program. So we'll get to replay what everybody says and hold them to it. So my name is Dewey Bartlett. I'm the owner of Keener Oil and Gas Company in Tulsa. I'm also chairman of the board of the OEPA, the Oklahoma Energy Producers Alliance. We've been in business about 5 or 6 years, but our entire board members, we're from all over the state. Our membership of 550 is also from all over the state. We're very much a grassroots organization. When we were created, Mike Cantrell, several others of us came together with the understanding that the small independent oil and natural gas producers in Oklahoma need to be better represented. Our positions, our regulatory capability of interacting with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and the Oklahoma State Legislature needed to be improved and well understood. So we formed the OEPA, and we haven't looked back. We've always had a great relationship with each one of the members of this august body. We've always respected in a very high level the work that you all do, each and every one of you. We do hope that you have the same feeling towards us. I would ask one thing to you, that if ever you do have a question about our industry, to please never hesitate to give any one of us a phone call. Ask us to come to your office. Ask us to give our position on an issue that you might not understand well. You might want to have it explained, at least to what it does to us and to our employees and to all the families that are represented by the employees that we have throughout the state of Oklahoma. We're very proud of the history that we have. Many of us, board members and members, are the owners of our companies. Whenever something does happen, it happens directly to us. Any decisions we make is a direct impact not only upon our employees and the people we do business with, but it has a direct impact upon us. So we do have a lot of interest in the things that you do, and when we do come to you with an idea of something to consider or to promote or oppose, whatever that might be, it's from a real visceral interest of ours. We can also help you out with things that might be not be of direct impact to us, but it does in some manner, shape, or form, such as electric rates. Other than the cost of employees, electricity is very, very important to our businesses in the oil and gas industry. And the rates that we're charged have a very direct impact upon us, especially when prices are very low, prices of crude oil and or natural gas. We generally operate fairly marginal oil wells, stripper wells throughout Oklahoma. So we are very interested in making certain that we do, first of all, have access to electricity, but also that it is reasonably priced, as well as being accessible. You might wonder also about what's the significance of Cushing, Oklahoma, and the pipeline that the president stopped when he first was inaugurated as president of the United States. Cushing, Oklahoma has a direct impact on the pricing of crude oil, for example. That pipeline fed crude oil, or would have fed crude oil to Cushing, Oklahoma, therefore would have a tremendous impact upon the pricing that is predicated upon supply and demand, which Cushing represents. So things like that, we're very, very agreeable to having a discussion with you at any time. Can give you a background on what the other opportunity might be if you're having a discussion about something. Well, we do thank you very much for being here. Whether or not you're new to the legislature or a hardened veteran, the oil and gas industry is something that is really the underpinning of our state. It employs thousands and thousands of people. It provides millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenues and of taxes to the state of Oklahoma, allowing counties and cities through sales taxes, all sorts of things that we support and we continue to support. One thing you can always count on us, we'll always be here. We're not going to be here and gone tomorrow. We will be here every day through generation and generation. I can give you our word on that. Well, let me introduce to you, we have several board members that are here from various parts of the state. David Guest, who's also the chairman of our legislative committee. Guest Petroleum from Edmond, Oklahoma is here. David. David Little, Kingery Injury. He's the president, head guy. He's the one to talk to. Ardmore. If you want to have anything done in Ardmore, here's the guy right there. Tom Dunlap, Triple D Drilling Company, Ardmore, Oklahoma as well. Tom Dunlap is an engineer without saying he has a tremendous amount of knowledge of our industry and how it affects the regulatory aspects of all aspects of it. Senator Zach Taylor from Seminole. Where's Zach? Is he? There he is over here. Zach's on our board, and we look to him for guidance and advice on a variety of issues. But also he represents one of the things we're very proud of is he's in the legislature. But he's also from one of the smaller communities, from the rural areas of Oklahoma. Great example of what our industry is about and how we have a very positive effect upon the rural activities throughout Oklahoma. Parker Bowles. Where's Parker? Parker's here. Split Six Land. I don't know where that name came from, but it's a good one. Oklahoma City. Parker's the landman. He knows, also represents us with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and knows a lot of the ins and outs of the land business and the various regulatory activities that the Corporation Commission is doing. Bruce McKellar, Incorporated, Oklahoma City. Bruce, there he is right here. He's one of the Oklahoma City people. His family's been in the business for a long, long time. Good member of our board. And Mike Cantrell, Bubba here? Just walking in. Whoa. Okay, that better? Were you not able to hear me? Want me to start over again? Is that a unanimous no? Well, I'd like to introduce to you who take it over from here. We will have questions at the end of our presentations. We'll have about 3 or 4 people speak to you, and at the end of it all, we'll take questions at that point if that's all right. The McGregor decision is a decision that the U.S. Supreme Court made a few years ago and has the potential, has an immediate impact upon essentially the eastern half of our state. But the potential for problems to occur is very, very real, both immediately as well as in the future, depending on how the courts react and act upon it, both in a criminal aspect of it as well as in the civil aspect of it. The Solicitor General of the Attorney General's office is here to speak to us. Mithen, I'm going to mispronounce your name as always. Manson Hanoi is here to speak to us, and he will give us up to date on the McGregor decision, what it does to us, what the future looks like. There was a decision just recently. He'll probably explain that to us as well. So take it away, please.
Dewey's a bit taller than I am. Well, thank you, Dewey, and thank you for the introduction. So a little bit about myself. I serve as Solicitor General in the Oklahoma Attorney General's office, and that means that I'm in charge of the state's cases at the U.S. Supreme Court, the Oklahoma Supreme Court, as well as litigation relating to other sovereigns, like litigation against the federal government or other states, or in the case of McGregor, relating to Indian tribes. I also deal with most of the constitutional issues that come before the office, including defending the constitutionality of bills passed by the legislature. So as Dewey explained, McGirt, which resulted in the eastern half of the state being declared a series of Indian reservations, has potentially important impacts on the state. Most immediately, McGirt was a criminal case, and it impacts the state's criminal jurisdiction, specifically over crimes committed by folks who are Native American or enrolled in an Indian tribe in the eastern half of the state. And that, of course, has enormous implications for public safety, as the state has been prosecuting those types of crimes for over 100 years. And it involves thousands of crimes a year. And, you know, the tribal governments and federal government are only now just starting to create the infrastructure to be able to take on those tasks. But to think about what it means broadly to be on a reservation, and just kind of thinking about this at a 40,000 foot level. So, you know, understand that there are lots of exceptions to what I'm about to say. I'm just kind of giving the general rule. So as you're sitting here today in Oklahoma City, you're essentially regulated by two governments: the federal government, who can regulate you in certain things, and I'm sure you have to deal with some of those regulations, and the state government, who can regulate you in other things, and then things that sort of come off the state government, like political subdivisions, like counties and cities and whatnot, but those are all under the state government. On Indian reservation, there are three governments: the federal government, the state government, and the tribal government. It's not like the state's completely kicked out of the eastern half of the state. It's just that it has less regulatory power than it did before, and the tribes have more regulatory power, and the federal government has more regulatory power. I mean, one thing that you have to realize is that this isn't about it's the state versus the tribe. This is actually a lot more power of the federal government now on the eastern half of the state. And I'll get into one example of that. And so don't think of this as just, oh, you know, this is going to be more power for the tribes. It's also the federal government having more power over you on that half of the state. And who gets to exercise authority in any given situation on a reservation often depends on the tribal membership of the person involved. And so the state has a lot less power over members of tribes, especially members of tribes on their own reservation. So a Cherokee on the Cherokee reservation, et cetera. And the tribes and the federal government have a lot more power. Meanwhile, if you're not a member of a tribe, then the federal government and the tribal government won't have as much increased power over you. The state government will retain most of its authority, but there are exceptions to that rule where the tribes can exercise authority over non-Indians. So this has, again, as I said, immediately caused issues with respect to criminal jurisdiction. And recently, the Supreme Court heard some of our attempts to get these issues in front of them on the criminal side of things, decided to take up review of some issues and not take up review of others. So one of the things we asked them was to reconsider the whole McGirt decision, and they declined to do so. But one thing they did do is consider whether the McGirt decision means that we don't have jurisdiction over non-Indians who commit crimes against Indians. Remember, I said that it'll depend, the state's authority will depend on whether it involves an Indian, and McGirt told us we don't have authority over Indians who commit crimes, but what about non-Indians who commit crimes against Indians? And we're asking the Supreme Court to say we still have that authority, and they decided to take up that issue. It'll be argued in April and decided by the end of June. But outside of the criminal front, which I understand for public safety reasons is important to you, but maybe not for reasons related to your business, there are things that are happening on the side of things that will affect your business. So one of the first things that we did after the McGirt decision was decided was we took advantage of a law that was enacted by Senator Inhofe. He inserted it into a transportation bill back in 2005. And thank God he did so. He did not know that something like this was going to happen, but it was great that there was a law there to help us when it did. This law is known as SAFETEA, SAFETEA. It's an acronym because Congress likes acronyms. And it stands for like safe and accountable transportation, something or another, right? You know, I can't remember a 7-letter acronym. But anyways, and the law basically says that normally on Indian country, like a reservation, for all the programs that EPA has, EPA gets to administer those programs on Indian country and not the state, even though the state, for example, DEQ, would implement those programs elsewhere. So think about the Clean Water Act. Think about the Clean Air Act. Some of you have to get permits under the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and you get those permits from DEQ rather than having to go to DC to get them from EPA. But if you lived on a reservation, you'd have to get them from EPA. Well, now that the Supreme Court decided that half the state is Indian country, what would have happened is all of your environmental permits from DEQ would have not been worth the paper they were printed on, and you'd have to go to EPA to potentially get a new environmental permit. And maybe while you were waiting for that new permit and spending time and money on it, you probably wouldn't be able to do anything because otherwise you'd be in violation of some law or another. But in 2005, Senator Inhofe passed got Congress to pass a law that says that in Oklahoma, if Oklahoma wants to administer those programs on Indian country, all it has to do is ask EPA for it, and EPA has to give them the authority to do so. So immediately after the Mcgregor decision was decided, our office got together with the governor's office and DEQ and sent a letter to EPA saying, hey, there's this law saying that we could administer programs on Indian country. Give us that authority, please and thank you. The EPA at that time and during the Trump administration spent a couple months thinking about it and said, yes, here you go. So the reality of the matter was that environmental regulation, after we got that, was going to be unchanged for the eastern half of the state. Well, and by the way, this is what the tribes had told the Supreme Court would happen. They said, Supreme Court, don't worry about ruling in our favor, because on the environmental side of things, on the oil and gas side of things, Oklahoma can just go and ask for this authority. Okay, well, we did ask for the authority. We got it. And as soon as we got it, the tribes all objected. And the Pawnee Nation sued the EPA for giving us that authority. And then the case just kind of sat on ice for a long time until, lo and behold, last month in December, the Biden administration's EPA said, we're going to reconsider what we did here and maybe take this authority back away from Oklahoma. And while we reconsider what we're doing, we want to take this authority back away from Oklahoma. You have 45 days to give us a comment on that. Those comment letters to the EPA are due on Monday. We will be filing a comment letter saying, don't you dare. And here's all the bad things that will happen. And also, if you do so, it will be illegal. But it is a major, major, major issue. I think OEPA is engaged with this issue and maybe filing its own comment letter on it. But it's something that I want to raise for y'all, that if EPA withdraws this authority from DEQ and other state agencies, you know, to the extent that you have been interfacing with any of these state agencies on environmental issues, whether it be DEQ or OCC or what have you, that may go away, and you may have to interface with EPA instead. And I can't even begin to imagine the disruption that would cause. So hopefully that doesn't happen. If it does happen, we will sue over it, and we will try to get it stopped. And I'm pretty confident in our ability to win this because the law is pretty clear that EPA has to do this. But one of the things EPA is considering doing is saying, well, maybe we'll want to impose conditions on Oklahoma's authority and force them to consult with the tribes before they do any environmental things in the eastern half of the state. So that's one thing that you should be aware of. The other involves the surface coal mining, which you may have seen there was a lawsuit about. As I mentioned, this is not necessarily about tribal power, but also increased federal power. So as soon as, not as soon as, but after the Supreme Court decided McGirt, the Department of the Interior under the Biden administration said, well, now that the eastern half of the state is Indian country, under this special law called SMCRA, this one I think I know the acronym for, Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act. We, the Interior Department, have control over all surface coal mining and reclamation of coal mines in the eastern half of the state, instead of the Oklahoma Department of Mines and the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. And they went over and took it over. We sued over it. Unfortunately, a federal judge agreed with them, saying, hey, I hate McGirt. I think McGirt's causing havoc, but it's the law, and the federal government has power over this. And that's just one example of, again, it's not like the tribes are managing this now. It's going to be the Interior Department that manages surface coal mining in the eastern half of the state. It's about increased federal power, not about increased tribal power in this situation. So those were, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you have lots of other speakers. So those are the things I wanted to sort of preview to you, and I'm happy to answer questions as to what's going on in the space of McGirt. There are also potentially lots of other implications that Dewey mentioned, including taxation and regulatory issues. So far, those have not reared their ugly head, but we're keeping an eye out for them. Obviously, there's implications as far as objections to the state's taxing authority that we are dealing with right now. Those will work its way through the system. But I did want to also flag a couple of other things that our office is doing outside of McGirt. And as I mentioned, the Solicitor General's office is also involved in suing the federal government over actions we think are illegal. And so a couple of those things relate to the oil and gas industry. And two of them I wanted to flag for you. One of them was as soon as President Biden came into office, he declared a moratorium on all oil and gas leasing on public lands and offshore lands. Not sure, because this is not probably something that y'all deal with necessarily, given the small amount of public lands inside Oklahoma. But as soon as he did that, we sued him along with dozens of other states and managed to get that action thrown out. And so the Biden administration has been forced to start reissuing leases for oil and gas drilling on public lands and offshore lands. The second thing that's coming up at the U.S. Supreme Court right now that we're involved with is long-running litigation over whether EPA can regulate and how they can regulate greenhouse gas emissions. And this was initially passed for those who go way back, initially enacted during the Obama administration in an EPA plan called the Clean Power Plan. And we sued over that and got that stopped in court. And then the Trump administration came in and they repealed the Clean Power Plan and enacted the Affordable Clean Energy Rule, which was a regulation of greenhouse gases, but one in a way that was much more economically responsible. And then the other side sued over that, and then they won in court. And then now the Biden administration wants to do their own greenhouse gas plan. And so in order to stop all of this back and forth, the Supreme Court finally took up review of the case so they can define what the federal government can and can't do in this space. And they will be hearing arguments on this, I believe, in March, again, with a decision by the end of June. So that's all I have as far as what I wanted to talk about, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes. I seem to remember case law that pretty clear corporation commission has jurisdiction over
Yeah. So there's a statute that was passed called the Stigler Act, and has been amended and renewed over the decades. And it solidifies Oklahoma's corporation commissions, or Oklahoma broadly, and we've given that to the corporation commission's jurisdiction over oil and gas matters. Now, that may not be the case in certain areas where it's tribally owned mineral rights, think Osage County. But other than Osage County, yes, we're pretty confident that will remain unaffected. We've had a couple of cases, sort of small challenges to that, and so far we've been able to beat them back. That's not one of my huge concerns, but it is out there. It's kind of all of this uncertainty floats around.
You mentioned the in-home fix.
Yeah.
And at that time, several of the tribes that are involved, the Eastern tribes, were. Sorry, I thought you could hear me anywhere. Anyway, several of the tribes that were involved in the reason we had to have that case, we're trying to apply for treatment similar to the state with EPA. And so that would give them direct regulation of oil and gas. And the fix at the time really kept that from happening unless one of the boards that regulates oil and gas already agrees to that. is my understanding of it. My question is, does McGirt impact that decision?
Yeah. So the way that McGirt impacts it is that it makes that authority you talked about much more important, which is to say that McGirt would make the problem absent that legislation bigger. That legislation helps with that problem. So, for example, if the tribe sought to receive treatment as a state, they would be able to engage in environmental regulation on their lands. And McGirt says, well, those lands are not just 1% of Oklahoma, they're now 50% of Oklahoma, right? So that would have been a huge issue. But now with the Inhofe rider, with safety, since 2005, it says EPA can't treat tribes as a state unless Oklahoma agrees to it. And of course, that would have to go through, that would be at the discretion of, the Oklahoma officials who are in charge, but I doubt that it's going to happen. So yeah, the Inhofe rider does continue to be a solution to that issue.
One more follow-up question. Have any of the tribes tried to use the McGirt decision to exercise regulatory authority over oil and gas?
Not that I'm aware of. There were some tribes during the McGirt litigation that tried to increase their oil and gas authority in somewhat ambiguous ways. Our office pushed back against them. So I'm thinking specifically, I believe it was the Seminole and the Cheyenne Arapaho. Our office pushed back against them and they sort of backed down. So far, any tribal encroachments on that area, we've been able to push back against. Now, and I do want to distinguish between a couple of things in your question. So there's a difference between oil and gas regulation when it comes to things like leasing and pooling and that type of thing, which OCC regulates, and things that affect oil and gas, like environmental regulations that DEQ does. And so the Stigler Act, which you mentioned, gives OCC a lot of authority. The Safety Amendment gives DEQ a lot of its authority. And there's a difference between those two, and I just don't want those to be confused.
Have you heard of other tribes interested in getting involved with things like zoning issues or
Yeah, there have been issues over the years about things like water quality, nothing that's been McGirt related. However, there is at least one tribe I know of that is fighting a city on a zoning issue with respect to, I think, getting permits and things like that. That is under the radar right now, and it's very early stages, so I don't want to get out ahead of it. But that is something that is starting to come up.
Are there any other tribes around the country that have a similar fact pattern with their treaties to the 5 tribes in Oklahoma, where we could see a McGirt similar ruling impacting other states in the way it has Oklahoma?
There have already been court decisions in other parts of the country that have cited McGirt as to saying the tribes still have a reservation. It's not necessarily it's possible those decisions would have come out the same way regardless of McGirt. But there are areas, just in my own opinion, in New York that would be particularly vulnerable to saying, well, now half of upstate New York is an Indian reservation.
You briefly touched on the Department of Interior and the decision they made about McGirt when it came to surface mining in eastern Oklahoma. That, as you mentioned, that's impacted Department of Mines in Oklahoma and the Conservation Commission. So I think the AG's office challenged that determination. Yeah. Did you mention if that challenge, has that challenge been heard yet, or is that the one that's already been?
Well, so the case is still progressing, but we asked for a preliminary injunction. In other words, for the court to put Department of Interior's actions on hold while we litigate, and the court denied that. And so effectively, that our attempt to put a halt to it didn't succeed. Now the case is still proceeding and we may end up winning at the end of the day, but for now, our attempts to get that stopped did not succeed.
So those responsibilities that those 2 agencies have had, Conservation Commission, Department of Mines, so who's doing that today? Who are doing that?
That's a complicated question. Okay. There's no simple answer to that question, and it's sort of a hodgepodge at this moment. you, Dewey. Good seeing you.
Thank you very, very much, Bethune. This is a huge issue that will have a lot of discussion over the next several years, I'm sure. Next on our agenda, I'd like to introduce to you David Little. He's the president of the OEPA, and he will introduce a few other people as well. David?
Good morning. That's probably after, it's almost afternoon. Appreciate you all being here. I'm going to give just a real quick update on the oil and gas industry. As you know, oil prices have rebounded quite nicely. We can thank President Biden for that probably. But as of January 21st, the rig count in the U.S. is now 604 rigs drilling. That's up 226 rigs from last year. In Oklahoma, the rig count is 50, and it's up 33 rigs from last year. So this time last year, only 17 rigs were running, and today there's 33 or 50. The oil price closed yesterday at $85.60, and gas price closed at $4.05. So this is good for the state. We ought to be able to probably get a tax break on our state taxes, income tax for because of all the revenue the oil and gas will be generating. No laughs out of that, huh? Okay, well, I was just kidding. So I don't, the industry's better. It's, in my opinion, moving slower. The drilling is not quite as active as it was probably, between 2013 and 2017, 18. But, I think there's more methodical, the drilling. So hopefully, I hope that kind of pace will stay that way. It'll keep more prices up so that the state can, collect a lot of revenue off the oil and gas. I want to introduce Senator Taylor. He's the Vice Chair of Energy, and Representative Moore is the Vice Chair of Energy and Natural Resources. It's their turn to speak.
All right. Still good morning. Good morning. So talk for a minute about some things that are going on within the energy industry and probably going to see this year in the Energy Committee. Last year's energy crisis brought about an investigation that I was part of on kind of a different committee. There will be some bills that you'll see probably regarding that. I know that Senator David had a bill last year regarding hydrogen energy, and she has filed several bills regarding hydrogen energy for the state of Oklahoma. I think there's 13 of those. And then I've got a bill that we're working on with OEPA, the Petroleum Alliance, Farm Bureau, and Terry Stowers, and a few others on PRSA, kind of somewhat of a controversial issue that I will be working on and trying to come to an agreement on and work through the process. You will be hearing from our lobbyist, and I'll take this time just for a minute to introduce Greg Piatt and Sydney Hill. They work with OEPA here at the Capitol. So you will be hearing from them on issues pertaining to OEPA and the energy industry. If you don't hear from them, then maybe there's a problem and I need to hear from you. But no, I'm sure you will be hearing from them throughout the coming session. I have a bill dealing with Corporation Commission that I am also working on. It's my belief you get what you pay for. Currently, we are not paying our field inspectors very well at all. And we are having trouble getting and maintaining quality candidates in those jobs. Field inspectors are the frontline workers for oil and gas. That is who we as energy producers deal with the most out in the field. They enforce the rules. They're tasked with telling us how we are supposed to stay within the rules, which sometimes can be a challenge. We currently start them in the low 40s, which is not a very good living in today's environment. So I have a bill raising that minimum pay to $60,000, which is still not great, but it's a whole lot better than 42. So I'll be working on that. There's always issues within the Corporation Commission that will probably be talked about here in a little bit, but that is who our industry deals with the most. The Corporation Commission is tasked with enforcing the statutes, and then they have, of course, their rules that they create. They're supposed to remain within the statutes, which is another challenge at times. So I want to leave you with a little bit, not necessarily from the Energy Committee, but from our organization. I am excited that we have moved away from fighting within the industry. I am excited that OEPA and the Petroleum Alliance are now trying to work together, try to go in the same direction somewhat. That is not to say that we are going to agree on everything, because I can guarantee you we will not. There will be times that Greg Piatt and his better half there, Sydney, will come by your office and tell you that we disagree with something that the Alliance is working on. So we will do our best, our organization and our members will do our best to educate you on why we disagree with something. We will give you as much information as possible so you can make an educated decision. But I also want you to know, and I want you to leave here knowing that just because we disagree on something, we are not going to be your enemy from here forward. We can disagree on something and still come back to your office on the next issue and be friends and colleagues and work on that issue together. We just want you to make educated decisions. And if you decide that you don't agree with us on a particular subject or bill, that is okay. We just want to do our best to give you the most information so you can be educated on that particular bill. So with that, I'll turn it over to the other chamber and let him fill you in on what's going on in the House.
First off, I want to start off by saying Chairman Bowles is very disappointed he can't be here. He sends his regrets. He had a prior commitment in district, and so he was very sad to not be able to be here. He really appreciates the work the OEPA does and the relationship that we have, not just as the House, but all legislators have with the OEPA. I really think it speaks volumes to that relationship. And the thing that I think I like the most about the OEPA is that you guys do live in the towns that you work. You know, you're in small town Oklahoma. You're not all in the big house on the hill looking down at the rest of us. So I appreciate that. I thank you for the investment that you make in Oklahoma. So Representative Bowles wanted me to make sure and pass that on as well. You know, if you look around this room, I hope OEPA members kind of look around and see how many legislators are here. It really speaks to the respect that we have for the energy industry and especially OEPA. For comparison, I promise you we had far less members present yesterday for the Healthcare Authority budget hearing. So if it makes you feel better, you at least outrank them. But you think about what's going on at a federal level. And really, I don't have a lot of updates as far as the bills. We just got bills, you know, sent to committee last week. But I really want to take this time to thank you from not only myself personally and Chairman Bowles, but from the House as a whole, because federally, your industry is under attack. There's no other way to put it. And we're very proud of what you've been able to do despite what we've seen at the federal level. So, you know, I think it's a real testament to your fortitude, your work ethic, and your commitment to Oklahoma. You look at this body, and you have people that will defend you as best we can from within this Capitol. So I want to thank you for that. And the reason that we protect you is because it's not just your industry, it's our industry. It's been number one in Oklahoma and will be number one in Oklahoma for some time. You look at 2021 with over $1 billion in GPT, far and away number one in that category in state revenue. So we thank you for that. We want to commend you on your hard work and let you know that we are in your corner. Lastly, I won't talk very long, but I just want to again say, kind of reiterate what Vice Chair Taylor said, that we've got a great relationship with you. We hope that you continue to stay in contact with us. I know that you do that on the individual level, but also I would be remiss if I didn't give some credit to Greg and Sydney. They do a fantastic job for you, and you should be very proud of the work they do here. You obviously can go through them, and they will make sure to reach out to us, and they do a good job of keeping us informed. And I think what Senator Taylor said is spot on. We appreciate the fact, and what we always want, whether it's energy or other fields, we want the information. We want to be informed about the decisions that we are going to have to make. And we appreciate the fact that whether we agree or not, we still have a professional relationship and are able to move forward. Again, I just want to thank you all for being here, and we look forward to another successful session this year, and to continue to move the ball forward in energy in Oklahoma. And anything that we can do to help you, be sure to reach out.
All right, I'm going to introduce Parker Bowles. He's going to talk to us about the OCC and the regulatory stuff going on in the state.
Hello, my name is Parker Bowles. That's with a W, no relation to Chairman Bowles in the House. That comes up quite a bit, even though we're both from Stevens County. He's from Marlow. I'm from the better city down in Duncan. Thanks, Marcus. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about regulatory affairs. I have a committee at OEPA, then we deal with the issues. We try to support what's going on in this building as much as we can, but most of our work is done across the street and focuses at the Corporation Commission. And, you know, as all of you know, that the statutes and the laws that are passed here are more broad in nature, and the day-to-day activity and the rules that we go by are formulated over at the Corporation Commission. We're currently in that beginning process this year for new rules. And we typically deal with, I'd say, three issues at the commission: new people, new issues, and new statutes, and how to implement them. And as to dovetail on what Senator Taylor said, there is another energy group in the state, the Alliance, and we do agree probably 85% of the time with the same things that they agree with. But that 15% can be detrimental to our business. And we want to be heard when those issues come up. So Greg and Sydney will be in touch with you on those things. But again, back over at the Corporation Commission, one of the areas where we do work with the Alliance that has come up in the last, I'd say about a year and a half, is every Friday morning at 10 a.m., Bud Ground, my counterpart at the Alliance, and I meet with the management team of the Oil and Gas Division at the Corporation Commission. And we talk about hot topic issues that have come up, whether it's something to do with a field inspector, which we try to deal with stuff that's industry wide and not specific to a certain industry or a certain individual or company or anything like that, but things that affect the whole industry. And whereas an individual might have issues, we'll try to set up some meetings with the appropriate staff. The reason I mention that is that the one thing that you might want to know is that if you have a constituent that calls you with an oil and gas question, and that you need somebody to broker or mediate with them with the commission, you can certainly reach out to me or anyone at the OEPA, and we'll try to help that constituent with their issue, or at least let their voice be heard over there. And like I said, we meet every Friday. The staff brings up their issues that they might have going out in the field. One of the things that we've realized is that I mentioned earlier, some of the issues is the newness, a new person. If we have a new field inspector in one district that is reading the same rules that have been in effect for 20 years, and he reads them a little different, he might try to enforce those rules a little different. And the commission staff may not be aware of that until one of our members brings it up to us. We bring it up in that meeting, and we find out that the management team needs to talk with all their district inspectors and make sure the rules are being implemented the same across the state. That's happened once or twice. I've actually had a few people in this room that have called me, and we've dealt with some of their issues and got that straightened out. The Alliance and OEPA work really well at the commission, and I think we're starting to work well in the legislative branch as well. Like I said, most of the times we agree with the things that are going on, but it's the rule making that we focus on, the rules that are getting ready to change. The staff at the commission presented some suggestions that they wanted to have changed this year. And they brought it up to Bud and I in our meeting. We went back to our members, discussed it, and came back with feedback. And some of those changes were immediately removed from their suggested changes. And we brought some new stuff to them that they've added in. And those are still ongoing. And that's the process. We're trying to iron out those issues before they get elevated to where you have constituents calling you, or where we have constituents calling commissioners, and where the industry has to get into some prolonged disagreement. We're trying to iron that out as quickly as we can. And I think it's going well. And I think that it's rolled over into the legislative branches. And we've had some meetings with the Alliance on rule or statute changes, which I know we'll be talking about later. And that's what we do. So if you've got any questions on that, let us know.
Parker, thank you very much. Good work as always. Next on the agenda is David Guest. He's the OEPA Legislative Committee Chairman. He's going to talk about some legislative issues. David?
Thank you, Dewey. Appreciate your time today. I know everybody's getting busy with session starting here in a week and a half, so I know your time's getting very limited, so we do appreciate your attendance. The OEPA legislative agenda has two main pieces this year, the first being PRSA, Senator Taylor mentioned. PRSA stands for the Production Revenue Standards Act. Executed or enacted 1991, went into effect July 1st, 1992. PRSA outlines the requirements for payment of oil and gas revenues to mineral owners and working interest owners. Two of the main concepts include one, requiring payment of initial proceeds within 6 months of first production, then monthly thereafter, with exceptions for amounts due being less than $25 a month. Additional provisions include a 12% interest penalty for late payments on marketable title. OEPA has worked with the other industry organizations, including the Alliance, to develop a language change to update and modernize the statute. We've worked to develop the best updated statute and a fair statute to all owners. OEPA will work with both chambers, the House Energy Committee, the Senate Energy Committee, to make sure all owners are fairly represented in this update of the statute. You know, I don't want to stand up here and tell you the minutia of the statute. You know, we'll get into that as session starts. So I just wanted to give you the general concepts. The number two piece of legislation we're looking at is restoration of historical economic incentives. This bill will be restoration of historical tax incentives, not new tax incentives. I think that's very, very important to understand. It's not a new incentive. We just want to revive old incentives. These tax incentives allow operators to extend the life of production from older oil and gas wells, thereby extending the tax revenue from gross production taxes paid to the state of Oklahoma. The first of this tax and enhanced recovery, or the first item on these incentives are enhanced recovery units. Typically, these are water flood units. They can be CO2 and other tertiary recovery methods. We have a brief PowerPoint on a successful oil water flood created with the benefit of the previous economic incentives. We're going to be taking a look at Mac Energy's Burke's Premium Unit located in Grady County. This unit consists of 16 saltwater injection wells and 22 producers. And I want to thank Mac Energy, the McCaslin family, who's a member of our organization. They're 3 generations. The 4th generation, I'm looking in the crowd, I think Cameron is here. He's the 4th generation McCaslin. So again, I want to point out we're family generational companies in this organization. We've been here and we'll be here for many years to come. This is a look at the incentives that went off 2 years ago. Some of these are no longer, very effective. The deep wells, very few deep wells are drilled these days with the technology. Everything mainly done is, either short verticals or long horizontal laterals. So the deep well incentive, I don't think is really relative these days. I know some of the big boys in the deep Anadarko may still do very little of that. But going forward, let's go to the next slide. The development and installation of the enhanced recovery units is very capital intensive, takes a significant amount of money upfront to construct. These costs include installation of electric service, flow lines to wells, monitoring stations, and other infrastructure. Again, this unit has 16 injectors, 22 producers. This unit has extended the productive life of these oil wells by 18 additional years to date. If it hadn't been for the enhanced recovery project, these wells would have been plugged and abandoned. Thereby, this was instituted in, I believe, 2002. It's been producing here year to date. With these 18 additional years, we have additional gross production payments, wages to workers, and royalty owner payments. We can go to the next slide, please. Here, like I said, the flood was started in 2002, actually took effect in 2003. The first year, oil production doubled. The second year of the enhanced recovery, oil production quadrupled. So in tabulating the information there, I know you all don't want to do that in your brain, so I did that last night. In the 18 years of the existence of this unit to date, to 2022, actually into 2021, the 18 years, over 581,603 additional barrels of oil have been produced. That is over 500,000 additional oil barrels produced from wells that would have otherwise been plugged and abandoned without these economic incentives to create this increased enhanced recovery unit. Again, tax incentives helped construct this project. The return on the incentive has been 2.5 times the cost of the incentive. It's an excellent return for the state of Oklahoma on this policy. If we look, you see that the additional gross production tax collected by the state of Oklahoma is $1.8 million. So we'll call it round numbers, almost $2 million in additional gross production tax that was created by this unit, which was assisted with the funding by the enhanced recovery tax incentive. The second proposal of the incentives are economically at-risk wells. These are oil and gas wells that where profit, if any, does not exceed the 7% gross production tax that has been paid. Again, I don't want to get in the minutia of the accounting on the at-risk wells, but it affects the very marginal production and very marginally income producing wells. Kind of in conclusion, the economic incentives allow producers to continue to operate wells, which in turn keep the revenue stream of gross production taxes paid to the state of Oklahoma for many years into the future. Keeping wells active and producing allows our industry to employ about 8% of the total workers in the state of Oklahoma. Overall, oil and gas companies, their employees, and gross production tax are the largest source of tax revenues in the state. Approximately 22% of all revenue in the state is directly related to oil and gas. So we ask and we hope that you'll help support these incentives to help all of Oklahoma. Any questions? I wanted to be short and simple. Like I said, we'll be coming around and talking to you in the future. We'd ask that you rely upon the leadership from your energy committees, because they have very good knowledge. But any of you that have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to myself or Greg or Sydney. They'll get in contact with us or any of our board members, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. And we will be meeting with Senator Thompson to discuss these incentives, make sure they will be favorable for the state of Oklahoma. Yay, no questions. I'll turn it back over to Dewey. And if you all don't know Dewey is a former 2-term mayor in the city of Tulsa. So appreciate your input.
Well, I know we've stated to you, if you had any questions, please let us know. If you have any more, let us know. Do you have anything right now that we haven't discussed? It's not on was not on the agenda. We'll be glad to give you our 2 cents worth. I was glad that David Little mentioned the amount of drilling rigs that are presently in Oklahoma. The number of rigs is really a good gauge of the health of the industry, but not only the health of the industry, but what we think of the future of the industry. If we as an industry are willing to invest several $100,000 and millions of dollars into a hole in the ground that we think might produce some oil or natural gas over a period of time and recover our investment, that decision is not made lightly. It's a decision that has long-term impacts. And obviously, if we're successful, prices stay up, everybody stays employed, and we actually grow our business. We always put more money in the ground than we don't. So it's a real good thing when we see the number of drilling rigs going up. In the recent activity, prior to COVID, the industry was just beginning to recover. We really had a prolonged depression in the industry because of the low prices of crude oil and natural gas. Began to recover. During that period of time, most companies, instead of going out of business, those that stayed in business, we did unfortunately have to lay people off. We also had to eat into our savings. What savings we might have kept back have pretty well been expended up until this point recently. We also had to borrow money from the banks, from the various providers. So we learned our lesson of many decades ago, not to get too extended, to remember that there will be another day, but let's plan on that day being a little cloudy for a while. So we are now in the process of replenishing our cash reserves. We're paying down our bank debts. We're now beginning to see wells being drilled. And if things do stay similar to what they are right now, I do believe that we'll see a real boom of drilling activity within the next year or two. And it hopefully will be a very prolonged recovery of not only the oil and gas industry, but all the related industries that look to us for employment and services. It's amazing the impact that we have just by drilling one well or working one well over. The number of people that we bring, the electricians, the service companies, pumpers, engineers, everybody that's involved with it, especially those that deal with the regulatory aspect of it. It provides a lot of people that are employed and necessary, the attorneys, the accountants, the bookkeepers, the field personnel. Of course, every well we drill just about is out in the rural areas. And we've found out over the decades that we are normally the industry that pays the highest amount of money, the highest wage, the highest salaries. So when we have a negative impact, it really, really does hurt the rural areas, and we know that. We've recently appeared in Washington, D.C. to deal with an issue called the percentage depletion. That's a tax benefit at the federal level that helps recognize that we do have a depleting asset. There's only so much oil or natural gas in the ground, and as we produce it, it depletes. We only have a certain amount available to us, and we try the best we can to get as much out of the ground as possible. Depleting the percentage depletion allowance helps us continue that effort. But some of the people in Washington want to get rid of it. So we did go and we talked to them quite a bit about the negative aspect of that. And we always focused upon the effect that would have in the rural areas of Oklahoma, in the rural communities of Oklahoma, the negative impact, the people that would lose their jobs, the tax revenues that would evaporate. All the things that we had worked decades on to produce would go away. And it would directly have a terrible impact on the rural areas of Oklahoma. And we believe that very, very strongly. So we do everything we can to make certain that that does not happen. So any further questions? David, did I miss anything you want to say? Mike Cantrell came in right when we were starting. I didn't get to introduce him. Everybody knows Bubba. Mike, is there anything you want to say? Silence is appropriate. Now, how many times have you heard that from Mike Cantrell? Well, we do thank all of you for coming. Do give us a call. Let me give you my cell phone number. It's 918-629-8579. 918-629-8579. Please call anytime that we can be of service, answer any questions. We always enjoy giving you whatever the unintended consequences are, in our opinion, of certain things when they're considered. And I believe I can speak for all the board members. We've always had a good, open conversation with each and every one of you, and we're very proud of that fact. So again, thanks a lot for providing us a room. Sydney? Okay, lunches are available in the back. Please take a few with you. We're glad to have you. Thanks very much for being here, and thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to have this on a Zoom call. That's great. Thank you.